Well, we are on the road to WrestleMania, so not a lot going on Raw and SmackDown.
Nope.
So they're still building
Pretty
stories.
basic
So
stuff right now.
told you to come on by. We can sit down. Didn't tell you what we're going to talk about, but here it is. What comes to mind when I tell you who's the best wrestling faction ever?
Ever?
What would you say? First thing comes to mind.
First thing comes to mind is got to be Four Horsemen.
And see, that's kind of what I did too. That's where I went to. But then I got to thinking about, how long have factions been around and how successful have
Right.
they been, and compared to what's going on now.
Right.
So
And when
I'm gonna give you a couple minutes, clear your head, have your little DDP over there,
yeah.
think about it for a minute, then we'll come back and let's see where Green is.
See where we're going.
Well, I'll see where if it's where mine was.
Yeah, because there's different. I mean, you can go Four Horsemen, but which one?
I know
Which version?
All right,
So,
hang
let's talk about
tight.
that.
Come on in. Welcome back to Midnight Riders. How you doing? I'm Johnny.
I'm Chuck.
It's kind of slow out there, so I thought I'd throw a little wrestling at you. We like wrestling, but like I say, the road to WrestleMania is kind of weak. So, you mentioned the Horsemen.
Yeah.
I think that's what came up in my mind first. I got to thinking about watching the Judgment Day and how they're really coming in. They're finally doing something with it.
Right.
With
It's something that's finally lasting. Stables haven't lasted.
Yeah, and I got to
Lately,
thinking,
the past few years.
I got to thinking back, where did all, I mean, the Horsemen, of course, is the first thing that comes to my mind because
Sure.
they were so, well, they were it. I mean, they were the first one that really, I mean, we can go way back. I mean,
Right. There were others, but
well, the Horsemen. Which one are we talking about?
my favorite group of them was when they got Wyndham. Wyndham, Flair, Arn, and Tully.
Okay,
That was my favorite group of them.
I think it's mine too. I mean, the Luger thing Luger was before Wyndham. When Luger was the first one to come in after Ole.
You know what? I always get that confused. I can't remember if Luger turned on Wyndham or if Wyndham turned on Luger.
Wyndham turned on Luger,
Right.
or it may have been when Luger turned on JJ at the
Starcade,
the Stampede or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't like.
I liked Barry Windham as a heel.
I think Wyndham was better.
I do too.
Yeah,
I've always been a big Barry Windham fan.
I never bought Luger much as a heel. He was more of I just didn't buy him as a heel. But yeah, I'd have to agree with you. That's probably the best. But no, we're forgetting about the Paul Roma.
Yeah, oh boy, are we ever?
I saw that on YouTube the other day.
God, I forgot about that.
Whenever they brought out Paul Roma and golly, I can't remember who was it Benoit.
Well, see now Benoit.
They did Benoit and Malenko,
right?
With Arn.
See, I always thought, I was barring the murder.
Yeah.
I was always a huge Chris Benoit fan. I always thought he'd be a great horseman, and when he was a great horseman, but unfortunately it had passed its time at the time. But
yeah,
that era of Benoit would have been great he was just
the thing about the Horsemen. What I loved about the Horsemen was they had the "I'm better than you" attitude. Mm-hmm. Okay, Wyndham played that well.
Yes,
Luger didn't. Benoit didn't.
No.
Sting didn't. When they brought him in,
the Sting thing was a bad.
Was a very very bad.
That was
there were only 5 of them. To include Arn, Tully, Rick,
mm-hmm.
Ole, and Barry. I think they're the only ones that could play that "I'm better than you" attitude, and that's why they were so good at it. But I got to comparing what they did at the time, which was. If you go back, you can go all the way back to the Mid-South area where we first started watching wrestling. You had Devastation Incorporated. You got Akbar, you got Kamala, you got One Man Gang, you got, for a time, the Missing Link.
Missing Link.
Forgot about that. And he actually had the Samoans for a little bit.
But that was the thing about the territories, though. You get your heels that would come in,
sure,
and they would be with that group.
Well,
they would get out of there.
But there were always groups of people. But to call it a true faction is there's a fine line for me.
Yes.
May not be for
Yeah.
you. I mean, you had, because I go back and you look at. I mean, Mid South and World Class down in Dallas, the Von Erich thing. They traded a lot of people
Sure.
back and forth.
Yeah, they came back and forth.
You mentioned something while ago while you were doing a little bit of research to set up for this, the Gary Hart thing.
Right.
I mean, Gary Hart was a great manager.
Mm-hmm.
He played the part very well. But I don't. You said you thought he had a faction. Did he have a?
Well, he did, but that was the cool thing about World Class at the time, is that you had Akbar,
Yeah,
you had Gary Hart,
sure,
and you had Armand Hussein.
Armand Hussein.
Right. He was a wrestler. He held a couple small titles there, but he also brought in a couple. He was the guy that kind of brought. Oh man!
Did he bring in Kamala?
He started with. I think he had started in with Kamala. Then Kamala came back with Akbar. But Gary Hart,
wasn't Killer Khan down there?
Killer Khan was down there.
Okay.
But see, they did a unique thing as to where the heels all started fighting each other and then kind of linked up.
Right.
And so Gary Hart and Hussein kind of joined up because Gary Hart was known for bringing in the Asian faction.
Sure.
He had Kabuki, Magic Dragon.
Yeah.
In that group, and Hussein had Bugsy McGraw, and Scott, and Bill Irwin,
yeah,
and Frank
that's
Dusek,
right. See, I forgot the Bugsy McGraw thing too.
And the spoiler,
because he was a heel before he turned and became this fun, happy, joy
right.
guy.
And so that was a little bit of the quote faction that he had. But Gary Hart was more he was more known for his management,
right?
When he had Adams and Hernandez in that group.
See, what I started thinking about in my head was that if you go back in the day and you look at the factions the way they were back then, I mean the Stud Stable in Memphis and the real old guy, the real old type. I mean, they tried to carry something off as we're a group of guys that are going there and just going to whatever. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a lot of turning back and forth. Obviously, it's what kept the storyline going. But I don't think where it's evolved into what we have now, say with the Judgment Day or with the ladies, Bailey's bunch. Damage Control. As far as the late, I mean. I tried to put my finger on which was better, what they're doing now, or how they did it in the past. Of course, wrestling these days is so much different than it was back in those days.
From what the story aspect of it from back then.
But I just got to thinking about all the different factions, and I'm gonna throw some at you and see what you think here. The first one came up to me. I mean, there were several over in the WCW area. There was the Dangerous Alliance. You know, you had Paul Heyman, who had
to love Heyman.
Paul E. Dangerously.
No matter what he does.
Whenever he crept into WCW and he brought in the original Midnight Express, went against Cornette. Cornette became a good guy, blah, 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 blah. Great time. He formed what was the Dangerous Alliance, which was Steve Austin, Rick Rude, Arn Anderson.
So I'm trying to remember who else he had in that.
Ricky he was with the whatever. Zbyszko was in there.
That's what I was trying to think
and then he had Medusa was in there.
Right.
And so that faction did what I thought bad guy factions do.
Right. Because he eventually Eaton eventually drug into that.
Yeah, Eaton was in there too. So they run roughshod, and they were in a War Games match. I thought was just one of the best War Games matches ever.
Great.
But then again, he runs. Heyman is the right guy.
Yeah.
To be I love the Dangerous Alliance.
Right.
I mean, what do you think about it?
Well, I did too. But then they did alliances and stables then are different than what they did now.
Yeah.
To where, like I say, you go back like the Horsemen.
Sure.
Majority of the time, I'd say probably 80% of the time, they would lose.
Yeah.
Their matches. They wouldn't win very often.
Right.
Unless it was the title matches.
Right.
They would lose on TV constantly.
Right.
They would lose a lot of the big matches.
Yeah, until they went to the Omni and
right, exactly.
Then they'd win, or they'd cheat to win.
Right. They would take the losses, and you don't get that a whole lot. You had the Dangerous Alliance was pretty stone cold.
Sure, but he was so good. Well, see, but that was that after. So that after Pillman left? Is that after the Hollywood Blonde thing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so. That's right. Because Austin's always been so good, and Heenan have been together forever. That's why I think he's going to be the one that inducts Heenan in the group. That's just my guess.
Heyman,
but anyway,
Heyman, wrong one.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, okay. So what other WCW factions can we? I mean, I remember the Varsity Club. I loved
Varsity Club.
Loved the Varsity Club.
It was fun.
It was the only Kevin Sullivan faction I ever enjoyed.
Well, and it's the only one that we really. I mean, we saw Dungeon of Doom.
The Dungeon of Doom, which was
horrible,
just a joke.
You know, the faction he had down in Florida,
right?
You know, the Darkness, whatever they call it.
Yeah, the Army of Darkness.
Thank you. We didn't get to see that. I followed that in magazines, and it looked very cool. That was with Mark Lewin.
Sure,
that looked fun. Bob Roop, that looked fun. But yeah, when he came here, the Varsity Club was. I enjoyed that. That was fun.
Well, it was
the only time I enjoyed Mike Rotunda.
Well, it was, but you had him in the singlets, and you had Rick Steiner with the headgear
and the Letterman jackets.
And the Letterman jackets. They're wearing
it was a very
the Michigan and OU and Syracuse.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
It was a very good story.
And well, they gave them titles. They let them win. They were winning TV titles. They were winning tag titles. I loved that faction.
Right.
That one was good for me.
And that was a little bit of difference. What I was saying, it's a little bit different to where your Horsemen, they would lose a lot of their matches, but they would interfere and attack on.
Yes.
You know, away from the TV tapings.
Yes.
And, you know, out in the open public. And,
sure.
You know, they attack them in the back. The Varsity Club didn't do much of that. The Varsity Club was just that group. Yeah, they might cheat, but they would
that's
beat you in certain ways.
That's the way the old territory wrestling worked for me, is that you always see. That's why the WWF at the time, I really didn't think that the recipe they had was, you know, you're not supposed to have the babyface as the champion, because the babyfaces chase the heel.
True.
So Hogan held it for all those years, but they made it work because of the cartoon characters that they created.
Right.
And you know, but see, you keep the belt on Flair and you keep it on the Four Horsemen, and they keep cheating to allow him to win, and that worked so well. Yeah. I mean, over in World Class, you know, when they had a bad habit of keeping the titles on the Von Erichs.
Sure.
Rather than letting,
whatever the title was.
You know, the only title the Freebirds held is the 6-man title. It's the only, and it was a useless title. It was a belt that was created just for them.
It was them and the Von Erichs.
Exactly.
It was created.
So the way the Horseman thing works so well, so that they were always the champion, and you were always chasing them, and they always cheated to win, or they got their ass beat and they got disqualified, or whatever it was. It was a great formula that worked forever, and I don't know why they don't bring that back. You know, and let the Judgment Day win all the belts. Let them be.
That would be a good story.
Let them have the world title. Let them have the tag titles. Let them have the U.S. title. Let Rhea continue it, and let everybody chase them. And let them be the badass cheaters that they need to be to really carry it.
That's what I'm saying. They don't do it that way anymore, and the fact they've let them stick together for so long, I think is good.
Well, I
can't wait for them to break it up.
Yeah, I'm hoping Mania is where they twist it. I hope that now the Punk hurt and the Reign and the Bloodline thing, but we'll get into the blood. Now another one that was in Mid-South was Eddie Gilbert, Hot Stuff Incorporated. And see, they were a good faction for me because they lost all the time.
Yeah,
they didn't win anything, but they were still a faction, and people still loved to boo them, and they still came out and sold like nothing else.
Right.
I loved Eddie Gilbert. Loved Eddie Gilbert.
Anytime they won, they cheated.
Yes. So, you know, that's another way to have a faction go in there and not be really
dominant.
Not good.
Right.
But
that was the John Tatum Jack Victory group.
Yeah,
right?
John Tatum Jack, and it's when Rick Steiner first starts, when Sting cut the Ultimate, or whatever his
Jim Hellwig.
You know, whatever his name was at the time.
Yeah.
When he cut him loose, but he still hung around. So, but then we stay. You know, we've got the Horsemen that we're talking. We're going to stay. Let's stay in WCW or NWA at the time, and there was a Paul Jones faction which was weak at the best.
Army. Well, yeah. Anytime you bring in Baron von Raschke and Pez Whatley, Shaska Whatley,
Baron von Raschke.
You know, that's your go-to.
But
the Barbarian.
Well, the only other one I can recall in the NWA, or which eventually would switch over, if you can correct me, do it. But the Legion of Doom, you know, with Paul Ellering,
and that was
The Road Warriors, Jake Roberts, and Buzz
Sawyer.
Sawyer. I mean, my God, they were awesome.
I was always a huge Buzz Sawyer fan.
I loved Buzz Sawyer.
The feud with Buzz Sawyer and Tommy Rich,
but one of the best ever
in Atlanta.
One of the best ever.
When we finally started getting TBS.
Yeah, one of the best ever.
That's one of those feuds that really made me just
believe wrestling was real.
Right.
Every week on the Superstation, you thought they were going to kill each other right there in the ring.
Yeah.
Buzz Sawyer was one of the best sellers in the game. I don't care what list you make. I don't care what heels you talk about. This guy made me believe he was either going to be killed or kill somebody Saturday morning when I watched it.
And tell you what, you want to watch a Dark Side of the Ring or something and find out why he was so good at that? It's because he was an asshole.
Yeah,
nobody liked the guy. He was a jerk.
But how many? But we know by watching all this and reading this stuff. There's
a lot of them.
A lot of them are. But that's part of why they were so good.
Right, and that's when Jake Roberts was really just getting started.
Sure,
and the Road Warriors were just in the very bad leather get-ups that they had when they first started that you can't wear today.
Yeah, but the thing was, Jake Roberts was, again, he started more in Mid-South with Bill Watson. He moved over to the
because of his dad.
Grizzly and all that. But they were, golly, I've never, in the old
Georgia
territory times.
Georgia time. Yeah, that's the old Gordon Soley days.
When people did interviews every week, every day, I don't know if back in that time, I don't know if there was a better interviewer. You got Ric Flair, of course, who was the best of all. I don't know if there's another better interview than Jake Roberts.
No, he was good.
On the microphone.
He was very, very believable.
He had that.
Very believable.
The way they bring the camera in, he would just kind of do this.
He wouldn't.
Here and
he was one of those first ones that wouldn't scream and yell.
Oh, no.
He would never raise his voice.
Oh, no.
He was always
He was calm, cool,
and very...
I'm going to come get you. I will be there. I mean, it was just always awesome.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was one of the very
and like I said,
very first ones.
And see, then, I give you a hard time. You watch AEW a bit. I don't watch much of it. It's just too over the top for me. It's not really good entertainment for me. I watched a lot of the Sting stuff. Thank you, Sting.
Yeah.
But the overabundance of factions in the AEW makes it not work for me, which took me back to the just past the WWF and started the WWE, when you had all of this conglomeration. You had the Nation of Domination, you had the Corporation, you had Evolution, you had Right to Censor, you had Spirit Squad, you had all of these things that started to
that's when they
accumulate.
Had like 6 or 7 factions, because for years they had nothing.
They had nothing.
And then all of a sudden you've got all these little 4-man teams.
Right.
Los Boricuas.
Sure.
The whole deal.
Of all of that mess, do any of those stand out to you as, let's just say, one of the best factions ever in professional wrestling? I look at it in let's start with the Corporation. First of all, you've got
I don't.
The idiot. You got Vince, who was a character in the program, and it's just like they just grabbed everything they could to create bodies. There was nothing that
really right.
Yeah,
I think the only thing out of that, I didn't much care. I never did like that. Now the Ministry of Darkness one.
Oh, see, that was a good.
That was a good
to a point until they put Stephanie on a cross. Come on, guys.
Yeah, they found that line and
over the top.
They found that line and jumped the hell over it.
Yeah.
But you had Taker and Bradshaw
and Farouk,
and then you had Viscera when he turned, and Midian, and when they didn't get NWO overwhelmed with too many of them.
Sure,
it was good. It was a cool little story.
Well, it was a good story, but the theatrics were what they were going for.
Yes,
I mean every time they showed up at Raw or wherever they were, it was you had the fire and and that was too much for me. It took too much time away from the actual program to
the story.
Yeah, it was a little too much for me. But I mean, so the Corporation,
I did not.
Where they put it in there, when Vince became the guy who was the whatever the hell he was.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's me, Austin. Yeah. It's me, whatever. That was horrible. But I try to look at some of the factions back then, part of that time, and the only one that really, really, really stands out is DX.
DX for one for sure.
For me.
I think a second one, DX by far. But I think a second, the only other one that I would think would stand the test of time would be the Nation.
Well,
before, and I'm talking the when the Rock came on, and before Mark Henry.
Okay, so you're talking The Rock.
I'm talking Farouk, The Rock, D'Lo, and Godfather. Or
what was his name? It wasn't Godfather then. What was his name at that time? No, it wasn't Papa Shango.
No, it's his other one. I don't remember.
Whatever his name.
Yeah,
but the guy that plays the Godfather.
Yeah.
Played the Godfather.
Those. Now that four.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
wasn't Ahmed Johnson in that?
Yeah, at one time.
Or they bumped. Oh, he came in after The Rock.
And Mark Henry came later. It's kind of like the Four Horsemen thing. They had 3 or 4 different versions of it, but I think
tried to rekindle.
Because Owen Hart was even part of it at one time.
Right.
I think that 4, when The Rock turned, it was good.
Well, when The Rock, whenever they built up to The Rock turning was good stuff.
Yes.
I mean, because it was just classic fun. It was just fun to watch.
Right.
Because every week they would come out, and of course it was a little on the race card thing, but the whole thing was they were
so sensitive.
Well, they were a great faction.
Yes.
And they played it well.
And Farouk was...
Ron Simmons was just so good on the microphone.
Ron Simmons and The Rock playing off each other.
Yes.
Those two were... The chemistry between those two.
Sure.
Good, bad... Just the facial expressions.
Well, right.
They were good.
Right. Well, and then they eventually ended up fighting, which is cool, which is what you want to. Okay, so we throw out the corporation, we keep Nation of Domination.
Yes.
Now, where do you put Evolution? See, that one really kind of confused me as to where to rate it, because I'm a Randy Orton fan.
Oh, I love Randy.
I'm a Ric Flair fan.
Yes.
I'm a Triple H fan. Batista was never a big guy for me, but the idea of Evolution was too Four Horsemen-ish for me to really enjoy the faction.
Right. Now I like the put together of it, of the 2 young guys.
Sure.
And when the turn happened, I liked the turn.
The turn was good.
That was good. My issue is huge Ric Flair fan.
Sure.
But at that time, I think he was already
past his prime,
way on the downhill side of it, and they were just trying to give him more to do and give him more and give him more.
I agree.
To keep him around.
Right.
I think a Flair in his prime would have been good for that. I know why they did it, because he said it was a Four Horsemen-esque type thing.
Correct.
I don't know who else they could have put in that spot, but I think if they would have had somebody else as the as the leader of it.
You've seen the story who was supposed to have it.
No.
Mark Jindrak.
I thought he was supposed to be the Batista.
No, he was. That's right. He was supposed to be the Batista.
He was supposed to be the Batista part.
Correct.
Then they realized, we can't do that. That's Mark Jindrak.
Well, they got to have. I mean, Flair was the reason they put it together, to give him something to do. But then they put a title on him, which was wrong.
Right. You see, that's my only. I'm like you. I liked the faction of it, and I liked the point of it.
Correct.
I didn't like the follow through and how they.
Well, if they would have allowed Flair to play the J.J. Dillon role.
Yes.
And bring in a 4th man.
That's what I was. Yeah.
That's where it should have been.
Yes.
But
it should have been.
They should have brought in another youngster.
Yes.
Another youngster to. But
And I think that's what they tried to do when they broke it off and did the legacy thing with Randy Orton, and gave him Junior and Cody Rhodes.
All right, hold that for a second. And we're back. I had to go get a Coke. A little chilly out here, but anyway, we were on Legacy.
And the breakdown of.
Well, like I say,
what they would have had Flair doing.
Yeah, I mean, if Flair would have been, J.J. Dillon. But anyway, we move into Legacy, which they cut Randy Orton.
Right.
And then Randy Orton picked up Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase.
DiBiase Jr.
Okay, I see. I'd forgotten about Legacy, but you're right. Mm-hmm. That was another so-called faction that I still think they needed another couple of guys.
They did. And I was trying to remember. There was somebody else that was I can't remember who it was. Now, I think there was another 3rd generation guy that was somewhere
at that time
in the organization that they had talked about, but I can't remember who it was.
Yeah. Well,
but I don't know. But it's another one that You know,
Sure.
they just couldn't find the fit for Cody at the time. And of
Well,
course,
sure.
DiBiase Jr., I don't know if he ever really wanted to be a wrestler. I
Right.
don't know. And it just kind of went nowhere.
No, he really didn't. I mean, he was there. He did it. I don't know. I mean, he never seemed like his heart was in it.
Mm-mm.
Oh, it was Trevor Murdoch around then? Or was that a little later?
I think that was later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and like, I mean, that one didn't do much. You know, then we move into, I mean, but before that time, you also had, I wrote a couple of them down here, The Right to Censor, which was, they were fun. I mean,
Yeah.
they were fun. I mean, it was,
Yeah, but that was to combat the DX and combat the,
sure.
the you know, the,
Sure. Then, you know, then
the
we,
Val Venuses of the world at that time.
you know, then we have DX. The answer to the NWO, or the NWO was the answer to DX. I can't remember which one came first.
Yeah, I think NWO was after them.
I can't remember which one came first, but it was they were
Yeah, because DX was late 90s. Yeah.
see because DX really didn't take off until after Michaels got.
Yeah, see, that's another one. That's the old Four Horsemen argument. Which part of
Well,
DX did you really?
Well, see, when Tyson was there, and Michaels lost to Austin in the Tyson match.
Sure.
You know, he and Triple H weren't they already DX, or did that just turn? They were already, just Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and China.
And Rick Rude
Okay.
and Rick Rude at the beginning.
Yeah, Rick Rude was in there a
Right.
little bit.
But that's before he flipped over.
Right. But
To
see,
WCW and went NWO.
right, and the New Age Outlaws were wrestling as the New Age Outlaws,
Right.
but they weren't part of the group.
Right.
Now
Right.
Michaels loses. He takes time off because of his back, and the next night on Monday Night Raw, Triple H comes out and he brings out X-Pac and the Outlaws.
No, he just brought out X-Pac.
Was it X-Pac only?
Yeah, it was just X-Pac, and then it was either, I think it was that night. Yeah, because the thing is, that night on Raw when they wrestled Foley and Funk
Right.
in the cage, and then X-Pac and Triple H
All right.
came out, and then that's when
Right.
they all became.
Right. And they still had China. So I mean, which group was better? I mean, for me, without the New Age Outlaws, you're not DX. I don't think you are. I mean,
Nope.
Of course, this was back when Michaels was going through all of his issues, and he and Triple H were getting anything they wanted from McMahon, and it was.
Well, it's the same Hall Nash thing over at
Exactly.
WCW.
Exactly.
They bullied everybody. They got what they wanted.
That's
they ran how they wanted.
That's right.
Then Michaels gets hurt, and then
Right.
then you got to turn.
Well, you got to figure something else out, and the DX thing was working so well because of the Attitude Era. I just think the DX faction itself was best when it was Triple H, Road Dogg, Billy Gunn, X-Pac, China.
Yes.
I think it was much better.
Yeah,
rather
as a
than
whole.
just Triple
And
H and Shawn.
I've never been a huge X-Pac guy.
I don't like anything about him. I've never liked his
Right.
performance in the ring. I've never liked his characters. I've never liked his.
Yeah.
I don't like anything about him.
Right. And on either way he went in
No.
WCW or there,
No, he was always.
I think he's one of those guys that just got along because he was buddies with Scott Hall and he was buddies with Nash and buddies with Triple H.
Well, if you go on any of you folks that listen to Jim Cornette's episodes, you listen to him, and his description is very simple. He was the guy that followed all the big guys around to pretend that he's a big guy. And that's
yeah.
He was the guy that they kept around to poke fun at,
To entertain.
and he was that guy that was that, and he was just there. I never thought he was a good wrestler. I never thought he was a good performer. I never thought he was. He wasn't. He was a second tier, third tier guy, messing around with the top tier guys, and the top tier guys always made him look poor.
Yeah,
because he was just not up to their caliber.
I think he's one of those guys that if he wasn't buddies with the clique and that group, he'd been a mid Carter at best.
Yeah. Okay, and so this brings us to the NWO, which if you stay at the three guys,
the turn was one of those.
It was one of the
epic moments in wrestling.
One of the greatest
always get talked about.
And but then you bring in so many people.
But then you bring in 73 people, and it loses everything.
Well, I mean,
when you have a show and you can legitimately fill the ring
right
with one faction,
right.
that's just it loses everything.
Well, you lost. I don't know. I never understood. I've watched a lot of documentaries on it. I've watched a lot of what were they trying to do, what went wrong. I mean, we've watched tons of them. There's tons of them out there to watch, but I've watched so many of them, and I never ever heard what they were trying to do by making everyone NWO. There's nothing left to do. I mean,
no. every week somebody turned. Every week
somebody joined.
The show ended the same way.
Yes.
Once they started losing, they spiked and was winning the ratings war.
Right.
The 88 weeks.
Right.
But when it started to go down,
it went down fast.
Ooh, man.
Well, you had the perfect setup whenever you had Sting and Luger and Savage who were going to fight against the NWO.
Right.
And you had a faction building, and then Savage turns. Okay, okay. So now you still got Sting and Luger, and I think Wyndham was there, wasn't he? I don't know who it was. Sting and Luger. Well, then Sting and Luger call the Horsemen over. Hey, let's talk, but let's team up. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And then they end up fighting with each other.
Right.
What the hell?
Yeah. There was no reason. Then to make it even worse, then they start to build that story with Sting and the hanging in the rafters, and Sting goes silent and he won't talk and blah blah blah. Then all of a sudden he does his big arrival after months of build up, and then now you got two NWO factions. Now you got Wolfpack and you got Black and White, and you got 25 guys here and 15 guys here, and
it was just out of control.
It was one of those that started off to be really good, a great idea.
So where do you put them in your opinion? The DX at their prime and NWO at their prime. Which faction did you give more? I guess.
Oh, DX without a doubt.
You think so?
I do. I don't know. There was just no. If you're talking if you're talking both factions 2 months after they formed,
sure.
I would go.
I fall under this is how I separate it. The invasion of the NWO into WCW is one of the greatest storylines ever.
Yes, that part great. Yes.
Nash has always been just an average wrestler for me.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Hall, I thought, has been is a great performer.
No, I think he's the best one out of the bunch.
Hogan is just Hogan. The heel Hogan is head and shoulders better than the face Hogan.
Oh yeah, you can just watch the heel Hogan.
With those two coming in the way they did, and the way they wrote it, and the way they scripted it, and the way they played it was just spot on. Whereas the DX thing was, it was juvenile because it was meant to be. It was obscene because it was meant to be. Mm-hmm. It was off the rails a lot of times because it was meant to be.
Right.
So I liked the writing and the storyline and the presentation of the NWO much better than I did the DX thing.
That's what I'm saying. If you're talking the first month or two, I'll go NWO.
Right. But as far as longevity,
without a doubt, DX. I mean, once NWO, and I really think it's once Bischoff really tried to throw himself in the middle of every story.
Right.
It lost it all for me.
Well, like I say, we're trying to stick on factions here, and so the NWO DX are kind of the same, but they're different. They had built themselves up to what the old factions like the Devastation Incorporated, the Varsity Clubs, and all these guys, what they used to be, into something brand new, which is now the DX thing and the NWO thing. That's where we've built up to. They built up to two dominating, absolutely unbelievably dominating forces, rather somewhat like the Horsemen, but different. But you got two dominating forces here, and they're the only factions around at the time because nobody else cared about anything else. And if there was, I damn sure don't remember which ones were there. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've got those, and then they start the pillaging, and then
show to show.
Well, then you got Shawn Michaels that comes back, and when he comes back, there's no DX anymore. It's just Triple H, and so then Shawn Michaels in China, and Shawn Michaels has found, whatever, and all of a sudden now it's just Shawn Michaels and Triple H trying to be funny again, which they weren't.
Right.
But this brought in another good faction that I really enjoyed that not a lot of people did. It was the Spirit Squad. I loved them. You know, I loved their slapstick ability.
They served, considering, you know, the leader, the Kenny Dykstra.
Sure.
Extremely athletic guy.
Who was a good wrestler, a good performer.
He's actually a backstage, I think he's a part of the staff now.
He was a great performer in the ring.
Dolph Ziggler.
Dolph Ziggler, one of my favorite wrestlers as far as performers.
Right.
They were both part of that, and I mean, they played it off so well. Yes. They were that heel faction that everybody could beat up, like what was Shane McMahon's boys?
Oh, the Mean Street Posse.
The Mean Street Posse. I tell you what, I had so much fun with them too. You know, so you know those certain factions have their place, and those.
Well, and they were the backdrop for Michaels and Triple H getting back together.
Sure.
And you know the second or third run of DX, whatever that was.
Right.
You know, they were McMahon's, you know, guys for a while,
right?
For more comedy. So yeah, no, they were a really good faction. They served their purpose.
Sure, they were. And so that played its way out, you know. And then you had Michaels and Triple H go on. They would just bring it back every now and then.
Right.
And then there was a kind of a lull in factions for a while.
Yeah, for a while.
For a long time. And then all of a sudden here comes the Nexus.
Right.
You know.
And that was built up just because they were at that time they were trying to bring focus to NXT.
Correct.
They were trying
so they bring some of the top line guys over there.
Yes.
And you know, and if you look back, all of them that were there, I mean, Wade Barrett, great performer.
Mm-hmm. Bray Wyatt.
Bray Wyatt was in that group. Heath Slater, which I always loved. Heath Slater,
another one.
I've always loved Heath Slater.
Yeah.
And
you had Justin Gabriel in that.
Well, you also had Ryback was in there.
Ryback was in there.
You know, and that
talk about it.
I thought that they played they played it wrong. I mean,
but the invasion angle.
Well, them coming in, and there been so many of them, and then there was really nobody. You know, they put Cena up against them, and you know, poor John Cena. He's going to have to go put something together. Then he had to go be part of It was the storyline itself was just. I think it was poor. It didn't do the faction well.
Right. I think that's why it didn't last.
Yeah, I think the writing for that particular faction, I mean, it was a good idea at the time, but how many times are you going to play Invasion and try to, you know, you blew the WCW and WWE thing whenever they had the WCW, whenever he bought them, you had a shot at it, and you didn't want to pay people all their money that. You didn't bring any of the big guys.
You didn't bring the big boys. You had Jindrak and O'Hare leading the charge.
You know, then you had to add Heyman to it to make it ECW and WCW, and it's just
you know, and to talk about it was a faction. That you brought that up. I didn't think about it.
Right.
What was supposed to be quote an invasion from the other the filthy animal thing with not the filthy animals. When Malenko, Saturn...
The Radicals?
Mm-hmm. Malenko, Saturn, Benoit, Guerrero.
Right.
That was good.
Well, that was great. That was great.
Good because nobody saw that. Again, no internet.
No internet. Nobody saw it coming.
Nobody saw that coming. It looked like it was like the NWO thing. It was like, why are these guys over here?
Sure. They tried the same game.
And these were four guys who were believable nut jobs.
Sure.
I mean, you believe they were going to actually go out and hurt somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, go back and look at stories on Perry Saturn.
Woo. Oh yeah, he's a nut.
Benoit.
Well, the thing, that was a great little faction, but see, they burned it out.
It didn't last long.
No, they burned it out too fast. So you know that brings us to Radicals, and then we got then you have one that really changed wrestling a little bit is whenever the Shield showed up.
Ooh.
You know, when the Shield showed up, that was a Nexus-like takeover, but it was three guys but they were the three absolute top guys.
Right.
They came in and did what they did.
And they were three guys that had the ability to do everything.
Carry a show and carry a story.
They were,
and they scripted, produced, whatever word you want to use. They did it right.
Mm-hmm.
They did it right. They didn't overdraw. They didn't overdo. They didn't.
They didn't make it just absolutely way over on one side or the other.
Right.
They made it.
It was just really, really good and done really, really well. And well, look what happened. I mean, you had, you got.
Just what all three of them have done.
Well, you had Ambrose or Moxley, whatever. I mean, he came in. He was the weakest of the bunch, the way they had it produced and written, in my opinion.
Yes.
I think I've never been a huge Ambrose or Moxley fan. I think there's just something about him that's just
I've always liked it.
It's a little too quirky for me.
Yeah.
He's
looks,
odd.
Yeah,
his looks and the way he tries to pretend to be a tough guy. It is, when Seth Rollins rolled and turned on him, that was
great.
Spot on. And of course, he's gone on to be who he is. Same in Roman Reigns. We know who Roman Reigns is. They pushed him a little too hard, and they hated him and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, the Shield itself, good.
And I like the fact that they didn't try to redo it with somebody else or bring in another member or do anything like that. They turned on him,
right,
and then they ended it.
Right,
it was done. And
that's true.
That's true. You don't try to remake that.
You don't.
Good.
And they left it alone, and hopefully they'll leave it alone. Another one that was in there was the Wyatt family, Bray Wyatt. Whenever they finally turned him loose and let him
let him do his
let
thing.
him be who he really was as far as a performer.
Wow. He was. Yeah, when he had before, and seeing that's another one. When it was him and Rowan and I say Brody Lee.
Right.
Before they brought Strowman into it.
Right.
I think Strowman was a little bit of an overkill.
It was.
But I see why.
But at the same time, and this is something I didn't like what they did. I mean, he had all this heat, man. He was moving. He was going. He was running. He was there. Then for some reason they bring him out and let him lose to Taker at WrestleMania.
Right.
Then they have to turn into jobbers for The Rock at a WrestleMania.
Well, see, that was the thing I didn't like.
What the hell?
Yeah, when they had them come out and have The Rock and Mick Foley or somebody else just buried your three quote deadliest guys.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't understand the burying of them.
Well,
they could have done so much.
They didn't.
Them.
I never understood the booking on that deal. Because that was they were hot. And
again, believable. Good storyline. Those three guys played those parts. Harper and Rowan.
Yeah.
Harper, I mean, another one who's gone unfortunately.
Right.
Man, those three guys did their part so well.
Well, they played it well, but it was produced poorly. It was written. It was. I mean, they were burnt. They're going and going, and all of a sudden they just have them job out to a couple of guys
for no reason.
No reason at all.
Nope.
I mean, hell, I think didn't Wyatt lose to Cena?
Yeah, one of those oddball,
one of those weird situations. I mean, if you're gonna let him wrestle the Taker at Mania, he's gonna lose. He had so much momentum, and then it just bottoms out.
Yeah. I say then they had him just take the fall on two or three different groups or whatever for no reason.
I don't know.
You lost any kind of.
I know, but that was another good faction that was built.
That they screwed up.
Yeah, that they kind of screwed up.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually, of course, Wyatt had a few problems behind the scenes, and that could be why they started to bury him a little bit. He was just getting in too much trouble.
Maybe,
but man, whatever.
My thought, just being a fan from the outside, with all the people there, what he was doing couldn't have been so bad. I mean, the guy could perform and had the stories that he could put through. And
well, I mean, when you come out, and Seth Rollins does it so well now. Cody Rhodes does it so well now. Whenever your music hits, and they come out, whenever you can have the crowd in your hands, he had them in their hands.
Oh man!
I mean,
every time.
I mean, with the lighters and all that kind of stuff.
Well, just look at his return.
Yeah,
I mean, it was all over social media. You had and
then they there again, they return it. They put him in this thing with LA Knight, and they put paint all over him. And what are you doing?
Yeah, no.
But anyway, it was a good faction,
right?
Doing the faction thing. Before we get to the two most current and kind of get to a wrap up point here, we got the Bullet Club. There's been many versions. It started.
It's a Japan thing.
Way over in Japan. So many of our wrestlers, if you will, have been part of it.
Right.
It grew to a huge amount, almost NWO-ish.
Right.
And then they said, okay.
Then they pulled it back.
They pulled it back.
Right.
And
instead they kind of, I don't know how much of it you follow, but they've pulled it into 2 or 3 different.
Yes.
Japan's heavy duty factions.
Yes.
You ever watch any New Japan or anything like that? They're all about that, but they always have been. It's nothing new out there.
Right.
And this is the faction that started with Balor. And then,
sure.
Cody Rhodes and Cody Cody took it over. And,
right.
Tama Tonga and his cousins, and it's just.
Right.
It's a hell of a faction. It's mainly been over there.
But it's been done right.
Right.
It's been one of those that started here, rose, boom, raise, split, raise, go. And
it's split over to here, as in AEW. AEW's got a little faction of some of the guys.
Oh, sure.
That brought it over.
Well, and then you got the AJ Styles portion here that calls them the OC, the original club. So not to use the term Bullet Club. So you've got all these people who have been a part of that group at one time or another that are over here.
Right.
I mean,
and everybody knows it.
Sure, everybody knows it. Everybody that follows wrestling knows it. But the Bullet Club could be one of the best, one of the most.
Oh yeah.
Well, one of the most successful of all factions, just because of all the members that have gone through it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say all these people went through the NWO, but it was so poorly written and produced. Who cares?
Someone that went through your Scott Nortons and Buff Bagwells and the guys who just got stuck in there just because they were a body.
Correct.
That's all that was.
That's
the Bullet Club, they all, for the most part,
Right.
even to the current faction with Finlay running it and some of the groups that they got now, they're all meaningful parts of the story of what they do and why they do it.
That's
Bullet Club is one of those that's going to have to be spoken of as one of the best ever.
So it brings us to where we are today. The AEW fractions are all over the place.
Well, they're disjointed. People come, people go.
People,
in and out.
I mean, you can't even. I mean, the names just get.
Yeah.
You lose the names. They move so fast.
The only one that's really stuck out there for any length of time is the Blackpool Combat Club with Ambrose, Danielson.
And
Cesaro.
In my opinion, it's a stupid name.
And Wheeler Yuta. Yeah, I don't know. It started off. It was a Regal thing.
Well, it's still stupid.
But yeah. So
I mean, if you're gonna have a faction name, it's got to be Evolution.
Yeah.
Or the Horsemen. Or the Bullet Club.
And that's why they go by BCC now. I'm sure.
Right. I mean, you can't. That's what makes a faction good, is that it's short and sweet and to the point. But I mean, now you had, of course, the Bloodline that formed years ago, and then of course the most recent one is the Judgment Day, which I like what they're doing. I mean, the Bloodline is what the Bloodline is. It was Roman Reigns. Period. End of story. He brings in the term the Bloodline after he brings in the Usos. Then some fantastic writing and producing have got them where they are today.
Right.
Where's it going to go? Well, WrestleMania will tell us where it's going to go.
Yeah, and that's kind of ran it. I don't say which ran its course, but the early storytelling was great. But now you've gotten to where we've joked about it. Every week somebody's coming. One of the two's coming out in a hoodie, ringing the bell, interfering. So faction-wise, they've lost their luster right now. They got to do something to build it back.
I think when you say it's ran its course, I think you're right. The original story has run its course.
Right.
Okay. You're gonna have to turn that corner here. Okay. He's gonna have to drop the belt, and they're gonna have to have an inner fight, an inner struggle. If they're gonna continue if they're gonna continue the so-called Bloodline faction, they're gonna have to drop the belt, and somebody's gonna have to get pissed, and somebody's gonna have to get blame, start playing the blame game. They're gonna have to do something different with it rather than come out and give a 20-minute speech every Friday night on SmackDown. You're gonna have to start getting. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's change.
And they need, pardon the pun, they need new blood in there from somewhere somehow, and whether that's Tama Tonga or that's somebody else coming in, or one of the Fatu or somebody.
Well, there's enough.
They need something.
There's enough of it out there.
Yeah.
to where they can do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they'll do what's best for business. They always do, and,
Right.
they're good at what they do, and we are fans, and that's we enjoy the soap opera, and we want the soap opera to turn this corner here because I want a new storyline. I want a new story. I want them to fight for who's in charge. I want to see how they can write a new script
without Reigns having the belt.
Without Reigns having that, you don't need the belt if you're going to be
Not
fighting.
For that group.
If you're going to be fighting for head of the table, that's enough in a storyline to let the titles go play with themselves while you guys figure out who's in charge. Then you can go get that. Which leads us to the Judgment Day. Which, if you'd have asked me a month and a half ago, I'd say they're done.
That's where it was pointing.
I'd say they were spinning out. They lost it. They lost all the storyline possibilities. They lost everything. They're done. Just give it up. And then all of a sudden, Punk gets hurt. The Rock, McMahon does his shit. The Rock comes out. Yep. Cody twists the story. I mean, so now the Judgment Day, all of a sudden, they're vital.
Yeah, all of a sudden they're unbeatable again. They're
vital.
They're turning Damian Priest loose a little bit, letting him do
what
he should have been doing all along.
You need them now for another good story because you're gonna. I think they're gonna diminish the bloodline. By diminish, I mean take the belts off. Don't give them any belts. Just let them fight.
Yeah,
let them fight amongst themselves. That's a great storyline on its own. Go now. You got to have somebody else that has these belts for a while. Cody's gonna have one, hopefully. I figure Rollins probably loses his at Mania.
I think so.
Okay, well if we let McIntyre win that one, I mean the IC belt, it's a 6-man, 7-man ladder, or whatever the hell it's going to be. No, they're doing that this Monday.
They're doing that to decide who's. See, it's opened up for Priest to win either one of those belts.
Yeah,
that Mania.
But if he does,
I think he's winning one of them.
But if he does, they got to drop the tag belts.
I think they'll lose the tag belts night one to whoever ends up there. Just my thought. Or maybe they make him pull a run and they keep the tag belts and he gets something.
Well, but I'm so sick and tired of people holding 2 belts.
Yeah, but
they need to split the tag titles up again. They need two different groups, 2 different teams. There's enough good tag teams now.
Well, I think they will. I think they'll end up splitting those.
I think you have to leave. I think you got to leave the tag belts in the Judgment Day.
Yeah.
Maybe not on Priest, but in the Judgment Day. And you give Priest either the IC belt or the world belt.
You gotta get him. You gotta give him one. He either pisses off McIntyre,
right?
Let McIntyre continue with his whiny storyline.
Well, if you notice, a couple weeks ago they had the Judgment Day being the babyface.
Mm-hmm. Okay, they kind of have to sometimes with Rhea.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So what? I mean, let's just say Gunther retains.
Yeah.
And then let's say Priest cashes in on Gunther at Mania. All of a sudden, he's a babyface winner. He wins the IC belt. Everybody loves him.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Rhea. And now,
now what?
Well, if you let a couple of heels beat the Judgment Day for the tag belts, then you let Dom and JD come in and win the tag belt. Maybe they're going to be good. You got a shot to make that an entire face faction, or one of the mid-range guys, where you love them or you hate them. You're still going to boo Dom because it's fun. Damien can still talk shit about people because he's good at it. Rhea can do whatever the hell she wants right now.
Yeah. She'll control everything.
And Balor can chase whichever belt Damien doesn't have.
Well, again, Balor's good. McDonough's up in the air on which way he can go.
Right.
Dom has proven he's a better heel than he is a face.
Sure.
But Balor, Priest, and Rhea, they can walk that borderline. They're good either side.
They can do anything.
They're believable either way, and the crowd's behind all 3 of them.
Right.
Either way. That's what surprised me about Balor. The crowd is still behind him. Everything he does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they got to keep that together, and they got a chance to really lift that group up.
All right. So bottom line here: factions, yes or no?
When they're done right, yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Just to put them together for this purpose of putting them together, no.
Yeah, there's a lot of times it was just a bad play.
Right.
I mean, you're trying to find something to do with talent, and you try to put them together. But
a perfect example is the Blue World Order, the LWO.
Right.
I get heat with the LWO thing of the past and now. There's It's like it's forced. It's not really.
It is. You try to do
necessary.
things and yeah. I mean, I know they like to sell the merch, and you sell more merchandise if you got a cool name on it, and an Evolution shirt may sell more than a Batista shirt.
Sure.
It's one of those things, and so I'm glad. I mean, it's one of the main reasons I don't pay much attention to the AEW product, and I like it better when there's fewer factions because they have a more opportunity to dominate. And a dominant faction is a funner faction as far as storytelling is concerned. In
that
my
part,
eyes.
I've always loved factions, but I'm the same way.
Right.
That era of Attitude when there was six or seven of them, right. I didn't like that.
Right.
You had 6 or 7 4-man groups that were
always,
right, and I didn't like that.
I didn't either. Which is what's going on at AEW right now. It's what turns me down from watching. Every time you have a promo, there's like 5 guys.
Right.
And that's what killed WCW. That's what's the big NWO thing, like you mentioned earlier. Because even after that, there were little factions within each NWO faction.
Right.
Which
exactly.
It was
too much.
It just got too far.
It was too much. So yes, I like them.
But anyway,
when it's done the right way.
But anyway, we appreciate you coming by. Comment, subscribe, like. Let us know what's going on. Let us know any of your things down in the comment section. We'd love to hear from you.
Yep.
We've been going at this now for a couple months now. We're really starting to get our legs under us.
Starting to pick up some speed now.
Really
starting to get
enjoying
some
it.
People following and enjoying.
We're going to be posting more podcasts if we can, or as we can. We're going to try to keep them more topic specific if we can. So appreciate you coming in. You got anything left?
Nope. I'm good to go. We'll be back on here. Like I said, we're going to be looking to get a couple of weeks hopefully on here. So yeah, please keep checking back in.
Probably coming in here Wednesday or Thursday this week. Start to go over some of the
March Madness
starting to conference tournaments, and we'll go from there. So till next time, we appreciate you coming by. We'll see you.
See you later.